Hello and welcome to Friday Night Live. This evening we'll be continuing our series on mental health.
We are going to start talking about panic this session, but before we get going with the talk, I'm going to tell you a bit of a scary story. So I want you to close your eyes and just imagine what I'm about to tell you. So you're in a hole, a deep, deep hole with no way out. The walls are tall and black. You feel trapped. There's no light. No one else is with you. You try and stay rational at first, figuring out ways to get out. But there's no use. No one is listening. No one can help you. There's no way out. You're alone. You start to shout, but no one can hear you. You feel out of breath, but you haven't run anywhere. And your breath starts to quicken. Your heart quickens. You are alone, no one can help you, and you can no longer control your breath. Now, possibly the quickest scary story of all time. Those a fan of a scary story might think that that's a bit of a rubbish one. But let me just tell you, that is one of the scariest places you could ever be. And I have been in that place a number of times. Not actually in the bottom of a hole. I have had that feeling when I've been on a beach or when I've been on the tube or many places. So when I was on the beach, it was a beautiful sunny day, picturesque. We were in Cornwall, it was stunning. My parents had decided to go for a walk and promised to come back soon. I was just left with my brother and I ended up feeling like I was drowning. Unable to breathe. I felt completely alone even though I was surrounded by loads of people. And this is a panic attack. I suffered from panic attacks when I was 19 years old after my first year at university, and nothing had specifically happened, but I would frequently hyperventilate and become crippled by anxiety. Eventually I had CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, which helped me figure out what my triggers were and how I could manage them effectively. So that is where I'm coming from. And some of you will be thinking that you've never felt like that, which is brilliant. I hope you never will. But I very much expect that you will come into contact with someone who has panic attacks in your life, and it's good to know the basics.
Now maybe for some of you, you're a bit like me, I've never had a panic attack, but that doesn't mean I've never panicked in my life. And for me, it's been different things that have caused me to almost have this kind of like sinking feeling, that sudden rush of adrenaline as you kind of remember that you've forgotten to do something, or this kind of feeling of dread that just takes over you. Now this used to be when I was at school and I'd forgotten my guitar for my guitar lesson, or my PE kit when we had PE. And it might seem like really trivial examples, but they still induce that kind of physical response of that adrenaline rush and that kind of fear that takes over you. And now at work, it tends to be fear whether I've left this really expensive machine on, knowing that if I have left it on and gone home from work, it will most definitely be broken in the morning. And this kind of feeling of just panic and fear takes over. And it can really throw you off your game. It can really make you feel like you can't think straight, you can't think logically. And sometimes it can be really irrational things as well. It doesn't have to be something concrete that's happened. It can just be a really irrational thing that then takes over and you just get this feeling of panic.
So that's where both of us are coming from. We're going to start with praying. Father God, I pray that you will speak to us really clearly tonight about what you want to say about panic. That we will know that we are loved dearly. Amen.
Amen. So, less than 1 in 100 people will actually suffer with panic attacks in their lives. It's still a significant number of people that do actually regularly have panic attacks, but everyone will experience panic. And I'm sure at some point in your lives already you have experienced that feeling of panic. It's not a new thing, and actually the Bible is scattered with people who are panicking. So just before we jump into the Bible, here's a quick kind of psychology lesson. So like all animals, we have evolved to protect ourselves. When we feel under threat, our brain releases certain hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. And this is to help us survive. I mean, if there is something that we genuinely need to be panicking about, that's a good thing to have a response to. And they normally make us either fight, flight, such as run away, or freeze. So for example, you might see a lion running towards you. Maybe not in Birmingham. That might be a slightly weird sight to see, but bear with me here. Now, if that was to happen, there's a really good response. The response is to either run away, so our flight response, or to fight it, to prepare yourself to battle with this lion to save your life. Or we might freeze, which is another thing that panic can cause us to do, which maybe in that situation isn't so helpful. And these things happen when we experience panic, whether it's a lion or whether it's something like I was talking about when you've forgotten to do homework or something like that. That feeling of panic still causes this reaction to happen in our bodies. And that reaction is actually, the hormones and stuff that then start pumping around your body to basically get you ready. They start your body releasing more energy, giving you more energy to actually respond to something.
So we're going to split up these three responses. So we're first going to look at fight. So one of the responses to panic is you might fight. Well, there are lots of examples of people fighting in the Bible, but the one that came to my mind immediately was Peter. So Jesus, the Son of God, was being arrested. Awful. You can just imagine the horror. This person that you put all your trust into is being arrested. And they were all panicking. All the disciples were panicking. And what did Simon Peter do? Well, he didn't run away. He did eventually, but he didn't run away. He didn't freeze. He fought. He cut off the high priest's servant's ear. And this was heavily rebuked by Jesus. But Jesus is forever gracious and he healed the servant's ear.
So maybe that would be us with the lion. You'd pick someone up and try and fight back. And yeah, so that's a really good example of that kind of instant panic reaction, and probably not very thought through. As you said, Jesus says actually that wasn't a good thing to do. Let's stay with Peter actually for a moment while we look at the flight response as well. So he has that incident there where his panic response is to fight by cutting off this guy's ear. But then he flees, he runs away, and not only is he running away maybe in the physical sense, but when people directly ask him, I've seen you with this person, you do know Jesus. In order to protect himself out of panic, he denies Jesus. He says, he runs away from that life and says, no, you've got me mixed up with someone else, that's not me. And another example, and one that we've kind of looked at in church recently, is Jonah. And God asks him to go to Nineveh to preach against what's being said there. But what does Jonah do? Doesn't fancy that, knows what Nineveh's like, and in his panic he chooses to run in the opposite direction, away from where God is telling him to go. He doesn't just run around the city like Peter does, but he runs across entire countries and has a very extreme reaction to God asking him to go to Nineveh.
So we've talked about fight, flight. So now we're talking about freeze. This is seen multiple times in the Bible, and it mainly comes with people not carrying out God's plans. Moses took a lot of persuading. After God had spoken to him through the burning bush, Moses froze for a while, asked God a lot of self-doubting questions, such as, what if they don't believe me? What should I say your name is? What if they don't listen to me? This is when God was trying to get Moses to go into Egypt and save the people. So he froze. He didn't want to for a very long time. And God kept gently nudging him, encouraging him, and he finally felt calm enough to go and do what he had been asked.
So why are we kind of pointing out these bits in the Bible where people have had this panic response? it goes back to kind of what we were saying at the beginning of like, this isn't a new thing. And actually dealing with panic is something that is shown throughout the Bible and the way that different people deal with it. And getting used to these examples and these stories in the Bible will help us to see kind of what a healthy and a good response to this panic thing is, and maybe what unhelpful responses can be. But overarching all of this is God shows grace through all of these people in the Bible. He even foresees them happening. He knows we're flawed. He knows that we will panic rather than just trusting in his plan. He knows that we will fight, flee, or freeze, but we know that he loves us.
So we're now just going to read out 2 Bible verses that I found, and I just thought they're really helpful. And actually some Bible verses are really helpful just to remember for those moments of panic. So this one's from Isaiah 43, 1 and 2. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you.
There's another one in 1 John chapter 4, verse 4, that says, Little children, you are from God and have overcome them. For he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. And sometimes it can be really helpful to, when you find verses like this that actually bring you a real sense of calm and peace, to write them down on a post-it note or a little kind of like revision card or something like that, and just put them up on your wall, next to your bed, next to your desk, in your school bag.
In the back of your phone, that's what I used to say.
Yeah, in the back of your phone case or whatever. And they could just really help you focus that in those moments of panic and fear, you know that you can turn to God and you can read those verses. And that's something that I've found really helpful in my moments of panic, of having to learn and come back to that, okay, take a step back and let's just turn to God. Is this panic kind of reasonable? Is it trying to protect me from something? Or is it something that's, actually really negatively affecting my mental health and not good for me? And being able to come to God and say, okay, I'm just going to pray, I'm just going to read a little bit of this, I'm just going to take a moment here and trust that you are in control.
So just before we wrap up, I'm going to talk about someone, my brother actually, my little brother, who's suffered from panic attacks for a while now. And I asked him what his triggers were and what helps him when he has them. Now, these things aren't just for panic attacks, they're when you feel panic. So actually for everyone here, they're really helpful tips. So the first thing that he said he really uses is breathing in for 4 and out for 8. And we're going to have a go at these things.
I don't know what that means.
Oh, well, it's when you breathe in and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you breathe out for 8. I find breathing out for 8 really hard. But it's really good practice and it just lets your mind slow itself down. He also said being still and grounding yourself. Now, grounding yourself helps kind of by maybe standing up, but also just taking in what's around you. So he suggested doing things like saying 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And again, it just really helps your mind be taken away from what you're fixating on and what you're panicking about. His third one was all about fresh air. Get outside. If you feel panic, a walk is great. You might not actually feel like going for a walk, but it will help. And he also said exercising and keeping just a real good grasp of your mental health is really important. So finding out what keeps your mental health healthy. Interestingly, he also said what his triggers are. So he's at university at the moment. He said one of his triggers is exam time, and I'm sure loads of you can resonate with that. Putting too much pressure on yourself, that can really set his panic anxiety off. He also said having too much caffeine. So actually think about what we're putting into our bodies, and also when you feel ill.
Yeah, so knowing these things and kind of talking like about triggers and things like that, if you know that there's something that consistently causes you to have that feeling of panic, it's really good to be able to identify it and then go, okay, well, how do I either try and avoid that situation, or how do I try and prepare myself for that situation? Obviously, you can't avoid exams, but if you know that it's something that causes a lot of panic, it can be really useful just to spend some time thinking, okay, what is it about the exams that's causing me to panic? Is it that kind of pressure that you put on yourself? Is it the fear of, what's going to happen or what's happening afterwards, and just kind of processing that through. And we've got a great thing of the fact that we can actually come to God with that as well. And you can just have that conversation with God of being like, oh, this is how I feel in this situation. Like, can you just help take away that feeling of panic? And knowing these things is so important. And it can be really useful to, chat to friends about it, or find other people who have maybe had similar experiences and the techniques that they've used. And yeah, just to kind of find that peace again. And in doing that, we're protecting ourselves and allowing God to kind of move in us. So always speak out, ask for help, whether that's from friends, families, a doctor, or a youth worker. Just remember that God loves you, He wants the best for you, and He doesn't want you to be held back by panic.
So we are going to head over to Zoom now to practice some of these techniques that I was talking about, and to talk about some questions, or to answer some questions rather. We are really looking forward to seeing you there.